I take photos for national parks. They usually reach out to me to stay in one of their cabins, or just in the area and take pictures of the nature or wildlife. It doesn't pay a whole lot, but I live comfortably when I'm home and get to travel to a lot of beautiful places all over the country. I get an allowance of food while I'm traveling. It's a good deal. One time, a park reached out to me that I hadn't heard of. It was a smaller state park that was just opening up. They just got their grant, or whatever they needed to protect the park land, and they wanted me to be the one to take the first pictures of the park. They said they would pay me well, and I was pretty excited to see a new park. Not every day that happens. Anyway, I live on the East Coast, and the park was in the South Midwest, and they said they'd pay for my flight, which usually isn't covered. I accepted the offer and took the flight down there. When I arrived, one of the drivers had picked me up. The driver seemed excited to have me there. He was young and told me his name was Mark. He explained he was one of the sons of the people running the park, and I asked a few questions about the size of the scenery of the park. Mark told me it was mostly desert, but that his mom planned on hosting concerts and festivals there a few times a year. They were already starting construction on a few cabins and resource buildings. He keeps talking about all the plans his mom has for the area as I look out the window. Dusty hills and miles of desert stretched out in every direction. Nothing I haven't seen before. A few hours later, we get to the entrance of the park. I meet Mark's mom, and she tells me they have a tent and some equipment set up. She drove me out in a different car, and it takes about 20 minutes to go to the campsite. They had a large tarp set out with a tent and a generator for me, much more nicer than what I was used to. She explains the shots that they're looking for and tells me to call them if I need anything. She says an awkward goodbye and drives off. The sun was already setting, so I got a few shots in for fun. They were looking for day shots, so I read until it got dark and waited for the stars to come out. That was always my favorite part about these trips. Being out in the middle of nowhere, you could see everything. About an hour after the sunset, I heard a series of noises. I disregarded it at first, but when I heard them again, I went outside of my tent to try to see what it was. The noises happened again. It came from multiple directions and sounded like screeching and growling and crying all at once. It was loud, and it was close. It was a noise that made my skin crawl. It was too dark to see past the lantern I had set up in the corner of the tarp, and the generator was still on, so I couldn't determine exactly where the sound was coming from. I turned the light off and switched the generator off too. It took a minute for my eyes to adjust to the darkness, but when they did, I saw them. It was about a dozen people. They were either gray or white and fully naked. They were circling my campsite, running on all fours. When they screamed, their mouths opened wider than any human I'd ever seen, but they looked human. I was frozen, but they circled my tent at least 20 times. I didn't know what to do. They would scream every so often. I didn't even think to grab my camera. Then, they all stopped, faced directly at me, and screamed one last time, louder and longer than before. When they finished, they left, all of them. They ran off into the desert on all fours. I made my way back into the tent, confused but unable to sleep. When the sun came up, I took the shots that Mark's mom requested and left. She was surprised I had finished so quickly. I told her to be careful at night, and made my way back to the airport. I didn't want to explain what I saw. She would have thought I was crazy, and maybe I was. But those sounds still haunt me to this day.